I have a background in supply chain, almost 20 years now, if I count my days in school. I've been in the AI world for about 6 months professionally, and personally exploring since ChatGPT came out a couple years ago. So I'm still very much, do not consider myself an expert in AI, but I do have some observations in leading a team of researchers and developers and deploying some AI tools, Gen AI tools specifically. And then I can kind of compare that with previous experience with machine learning models and other types of algorithms in the supply chain context. So today, what I would like to bring to you are some reflections on AI and how that can impact supply chain and supply chain design specifically. So you'll notice we're going to ponder the pond here. We call this our space pond design. You'll notice a theme of frogs throughout the presentation. The frog is Optilogic's spirit animal. We have a product, our flagship product is called Cosmic Frog. It's a modeling platform for designing your future supply chain. And in the interest of PowerPoint presentations and continuity, I was wondering if I'd be the only one who brings in a 2x2, but Professor Cohen beat me to it last one. So this one's a little bit more abstract. My axes, we're going to be exploring topics ranging from old school to hot tech, and from free-flowing to bottleneck. All right, and we have a number of topics to explore. We'll see how, this is my first time giving this presentation live, so we'll see how many of them we get through. We have GIGO lives, port strike, air quotes, 4 pi r squared, reasoning, Hoppy recipes, note to self, sports, agents, and 404. All right, so this is our home base, and now I'm going to ask for some participation from the audience. It's a choose your own adventure thing, so which of these topics appeals to you? Throw up a hand, you get to pick. We have a port strike. Why is that one interesting to you? Imports and exports, thank you for that. All right, let's check it out. So this actually builds a lot off of the previous speaker and talking about scenario planning. But thinking about using language models to explore future realities, I think he correctly made the point that by its nature, things that require training data are not going to be very good at predicting black swan events, because that does not exist in the training data, is an important point to anchor around. All right, so I've got some visuals in here. Some of them I'll present as a quiz if you would like to participate with your neighbor, or you can shout it out if you know the answer. Anybody know what this graph represents? There's a couple of hints in it. I don't know if you can see that. It is a time series. Container prices, okay, we got some volatility. If you could read that, it says gauge height in feet. So this is the height of the Mississippi here in St. Louis over the past several years. And it looks like, I wondered, for those of you who live in the area, do you remember what this would be like February, March 21, and more recently? Does that start to become a topic of local conversation as the levels go up? I see some nodding in the audience. Okay, so you have that local awareness of how some of these fluctuations can impact the visual appearance of the river. Perhaps, for some of you, depending on your industry and your supply chain, this volatility could have impacts on the movement of goods. I'm not here trying to make a prediction about the level of the Mississippi, just to say that we know there are elements of uncertainty that are going to impact our supply chains. And as was stated in the previous presentation, we need to do what we can to have systems in place, the data that we're going to need to evaluate options and respond quickly if we end up in a situation where instead of just going into the yellow, we actually hit the red. What does that mean for us? What's the trigger point? what are we going to do differently as an organization to respond in a resilient way. This picture may look familiar to some. I think this also came up in the previous presentation. That's the backlog of ships waiting to pass through the Suez when the one got stuck. All right, so just thinking about the bottleneck, you'll notice this one was down towards the bottom end of the bottleneck axis. The potential, what are the choke points in your supply chain? How vulnerable are you to something? And how are you going to respond if you end up in that situation again? I think my previous point, using learning models, language models, especially to predict the future, is probably not where they're well suited, but building processes around, as an organization and teams, how are we going to respond? What steps are we going to take to explore options? I do think there is potential for new generative AI approaches to streamline that process. And I've been reading, there's a professor, Ethan Mollick, I think he's at MIT, doesn't really matter. He writes well. He has this Substack called One Useful Thing. He also published a book, maybe some of you have seen. This one is, I would recommend as being accessible to people, technical audiences and non-technical audiences, to think about how this new technology fits in with our lives and in the work that we do. Encourage you to check it out. One of his posts recently was about scenario planning, basically, but in the context of AI itself, and how, because this industry and the technology is moving so quickly, the natural tendency is to sort of throw up our hands like, we don't know what it's going to be like in next year, let alone 5 years, 10 years. But there is an opportunity to use that scenario planning mechanism, approach, to explore different future realities for AI capabilities. And what would that mean if we get to a point where you have some form of AI who is doing things that currently humans are doing, or in combination with humans? And just, we talk about these unanticipated black swan events in the climate context, or a ship being stuck in a canal. It's also worth thinking through the potential realities for the technology and how that will impact what we can do, how we do it. All right, that's all I got for this one. Let's head back to the pond. Who's up next? Which topic appeals to you? Yes, ma'am. 404, all right. Go ahead, give it a read. My main takeaway here, I didn't know when we would end up with this one in the presentation, but I wanted to build in an opportunity for me to take a deep breath. Always a good idea when you're up on stage. But also, these LLMs are kind of weird and surprising sometimes. I was doing some research, preparing for the talk, and I don't even know what happened, but this is the message I got. And I don't know if it's LLM generated or not, but it was something in that moment I needed. I had a lot of work deadlines, other things going on, and I was pleasantly surprised and sort of delighted with that interaction. So I thought I would share it with you all. All right, back to the pond. In the back. Hoppy recipes. All right, one of my goals for the talk was to weave in a beer reference. So mission accomplished there. All right. First things first, though, something more substantive. This is a screen cap from AlphaFold 3. This is one of Google DeepMind, their research arm with neural networks and related research. But you may have heard of this technology recently because some of the researchers just won the Nobel Prize for basically AlphaFold allows you to predict protein sequences, and this is definitely well outside my protein structure is probably a better term. well outside my realm of expertise, but the idea of having a search space that is so big that it takes years and years to explore and to replicate one protein structure for researchers, and that timeline getting compressed down into days or even hours to discover new compounds and structures is, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's transformative for research. And we're just at the beginning. I think one of the interesting things I was reading about this winning the Nobel, obviously there's lots of underlying research over decades that set the table, but much of this stuff is pretty recent in comparison with other types of Nobel Prize winners who've built up that body of work over a longer time. And I think that is reflective of the fact that how transformative it has been for this biomedical research and that space broadly. So the position I'm putting forward here is if your supply chain is impacted in some sense by or dependent on recipes, that may be an opportunity for learning models where you can pump in lots of historical data, configurations, understand performance characteristics, or in the case of beer, perhaps, this is my brilliant idea I'm throwing out there, and maybe someone's doing this already, but exploring the combination of recipes for producing something like beer, I do think there's a potential for that search space navigation and vetting, and so perhaps there's something in your supply chain that you could draw a parallel to where there's worthy of further investigation. All right, I think that's all I have for this one. Back to the pond. Who's up next? How about here? All right, so you get the quiz. What is that? Do you remember from, is it probably geometry? 4 pi r squared. Who remembers that one? Did I get the formula wrong? Surface area of a sphere. Okay, you can, maybe I have a typo in there. So, but it's just a lead into surface areas. And this concept of, we got a few fun surface areas, and you can see if you can peg locations. This happens to be a myelin piece of art on the campus of the University of Michigan. That's my alma mater. That's our hometown for Optilogic, where we're headquartered. And on the right, we have some satellite imagery from the surface of the moon. I did not realize, but the tallest mountains on the moon, top to valley floor, I think it's like 24,000 feet. Yeah, comparable to Earth size, and the moon's a lot smaller, so those things are really sticking up. But the point I want to make here is surface area as a sort of conceptual framework for learning models generally, LLMs specifically, because that's something that I've been working on recently, and I had a big lesson learned that I want to share with you all. And the idea is, if you have one model that is trying to do many things, cover a large surface area, and you're training it to do different things that may be related but are not the exact same, then there is I learned a new research term, recently read a paper about catastrophic forgetting, which is a proven observable behavior with LLMs where if you start adding new capabilities to expand that surface area, if you're not careful, you can actually lose the knowledge in areas that had previously been good at or understood. And these neural networks are complicated. It is the interpretability question is one, like understanding what's going on inside the black box. There's still lots of research being done to figure out exactly why this is happening, but personally, I just observed this in the last 6 weeks, developing software tools where we were adding capabilities, and we added a new set of sort of functions that this LLM could do and handle, and as it got better at that, it got worse in other areas. So thankfully with software, you can kind of roll back the clock and start where it was working and then build from there. But I think it's just important to keep in mind that it will rarely make sense to try to have one learning model answer all the questions. Much more focusing on that narrow, for now, that narrow AI use case and having potentially multiple of them that you are orchestrating or deciding where to funnel the different questions to. All right, back to the pond. I had a hand over here, I think. Yeah, which one are you looking for? Okay, sports and agents. A little bit about me. I'm kind of moving off the end of the bench, but I am a professional athlete. Don't laugh. Ultimate Frisbee is a real sport, and I play professionally on a team called the Austin Soul. So sports have been a big part of my life throughout, and it's hard for me not to think about, when I think about organizations, organizational change, achieving potential, I naturally translate those ideas in the business context to where I'm familiar with building teams, high-performing teams in sports. So a couple of thoughts. One, you probably recognize the chart. You've seen something like this before, the concept of compounding gains. There was a book written about the British cycling team, Sky. Maybe you heard about this. They were optimizing every little part of their training and performance schedule, like, can we get 1% better at sleep? Can we get 1% better at nutrition? Can we get 1% better at staying healthy? Add up all those things, and like what this is demonstrating, the concept of compounding gains. And so setting this in the context of new AI tools and in supply chain, I think the potential is to kind of wave away a small gain at, say it's 1% on some dimension, some process activity, some cycle time for something you need to do to operate your supply chain. I think I would encourage you all to consider how baking that into a process or some type of AI approach, what that frees up over time. You can build on it. It's something that can get better. It can learn if it's structured appropriately. And that also frees up your human talent and brain power to be doing other things. So even 1% is something, especially when you keep stacking those gains. Another thought about sports, I almost went with the Moneyball reference. I'm glad I didn't. This is a football play sheet, kind of a generic one. But thinking about the decisions that go into play calling for an offensive coordinator, or sometimes the quarterback gets to make these calls. But having frameworks that you can lean on or as a starting point. Some teams will even script out early in the game to get into a flow. They know they want to have a certain balance of run and pass and get different players involved, so they'll have that set up. But then from there, it is a choose-your-own-adventure path, deciding based on the game conditions, the score, performance of players, who's available. And so this idea of connecting processes with a neural net, in the case of some teams, thinking about a head coach like Andy Reid as someone who has thousands of hours, tens of thousands of hours of head coaching experience, and probably maybe millions of hours of watching film. He has that baked into his brain, what the conditions, so he's not going to rely on, I'm sure he's getting some input from coaches about the analytics, percentage on a 4th down call, 4th and 2 at midfield in this part of the game, score. But ultimately, he's consulting his neural net as well and making that call. And so this is a point I'll come back to, but thinking about how do we bring some of that machine intelligence together with our human intelligence and sort of augment each other to make better decisions. And then the agents part, this is just a general schematic of I found online, but kind of wrapping your head around this idea, because it's a very buzzy term, but thinking about it in the context of like a team and having, whether it's in your organization or a sports team, positioning people or tools, bots, to do something that they can do well, and not have to be doing the things that they're mediocre or less good at. I mean, that's how talk about team being greater than some of the parts. I think that's how you get there. You put people in a position to succeed, where they can grow and thrive, and not have them have to do everything. And so conceptually, same idea, I think, with agents and being able to have multiple learning models applied to different contexts that you sort of are routing your needs through. And we'll come back to this if we're doing okay on time, which I think we are. So let's head back to the pond. I think we have a few left here. Anybody? Yes, sir. Reasoning. All right. I have a 2.5-year-old at home. His name's Benjamin. And he is very much in the why mode now. Some of you may have been there. And I was reflecting myself as he repeatedly asked why. I was like, it's after you get about 2, maybe 3 levels deep with that, it kind of gets philosophical sometimes. Like, why is that true? I'm not so sure. But a couple thoughts on reasoning. I mean, this is the idea of the AIs that can not just predict something, but able to have some introspection or self-evaluation, make course adjustments, take on feedback potentially. And the question for you I would pose is, for any question, how well validated, quality assured do you want an answer to be? I think sometimes you just want an answer, whether it's from a person or a machine, you know, give me the quick and dirty answer. Other times you definitely want someone to, or some machine to take its time, think it through, go step by step. And so there are a time and a place for reasoning models, and there's a time and a place in, you know, they have trade-offs when we're talking about LLM specifically. For compute, they're more expensive, time takes longer. But in general, you should expect more well-reasoned, thought-through answers, and that is often something that we want. So what is it? Same graphic as before, but kind of trying to make the point of why is this important? Thinking if I adjust the schematic, inserting a human in here with some skills, it's not so different. These are learned skills as opposed to coded skills or trained for some learning models. And this idea of having a reflection, some amount of self-criticism or logical decomposition, chain of thought, chain of reasoning, you could apply that to humans making good decisions. How much we do of that and bring it back into that memory bank, I think, is where the magic happens. So kind of translating that to our LLM world, I think there's a lot of potential here for reducing hallucinations. You know, you see it in the literature. It's just starting to come out because a lot of these models are new, but the power is there, and I think it will, in time, lead us to a lot more confidence and the ability to offload more actions and trust to these computer algorithms, because they really got to prove it, especially in these high-impact, important, talk about autonomous driving or something that's that consequential. We really do need them to prove it out before we're going to give the trust or running our supply chain. All right, I think we can go back to the pond. And just 2 left, I believe. No, 3 left. Anybody feeling? I see some air quotes in the back. All right, so with this one, have you heard this one? Deep neural vector transformer diffusers with retrieval augmented embeddings. I just made that up. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make here is, when is it helpful when we're talking about something that's this new and changing all the time? Sometimes specific terminology is helpful, and sometimes it is a mask for, or a opportunity for confusion. And so what I would like to encourage all of us to think about and to kind of bring some curiosity as we explore and learn, bring a little grace to ourselves and others as we learn. Maybe we use the wrong term. Maybe we have to throw in some air quotes. I am not an expert in AI, but I do have some reflections I'm sharing here today. So with it being this rapidly new and changing, and I think something that has the potential to really help many, many people do things that they would not have been able to before, to my earlier point about language, computer languages, you can become conversational in a coding language now in a way that took a lot longer previously. So the potential is there, but if we make it about, do you know the latest jargon, I think it turns people off. And so that's my little pitch to y'all, and the opportunity to bring in a little Chris Farley, which is always a good thing. All right, back to the pond. All right, we got Gago Lives and Note to Self. What are we feeling? Note to self. All right, so the idea I'm trying to get across here, which we'll see if I can accomplish with these images, is the arc of recorded data through history. We started etching things on tablets. Not many people had access to this information. The printing press came and changed things significantly. Opportunities for more information out there, in many ways good, has its hang-ups and brought its challenges as well, all right? Computers and digital technologies gave us access to even more and the ability to store it physically, a lot more information in many places. And more recently with cloud technologies, giving everyone access to all the information you could want and more. But ultimately, having lots of information does not equal knowledge, all right? So we have to be able to interpret it, understand it, and in this brave new AI world that we're in, it's not gonna slow down how much information is out there. And so I think one opportunity for using LLM specifically is kind of ingesting, curating, and helping to explain large sets of data. And an example that I would bring forward, Google's labs have an experimental product called Notebook LM. Maybe some of you have heard of this. The basic idea is you can dump a bunch of files, presentation slides, PDFs, text files, audio files. It will basically allow you to then interact with that information, ask questions of it, ask for an elevator pitch on this information, have it create slides off of that information. There's a lot of things you can do with it. I'm not trying to give you a pitch specifically for Notebook LM, that just thinking about how we have new tools that allow us to interact with more data information in new ways that has the potential to really transform our ability to gain knowledge from all of the data and information that is out there. The other point I will just make is sort of generationally, most of us in the room are sort of management level. There's some students here who I'm guessing are a lot more comfortable and as digital natives using new technology like this. So I was reading recently someone who was suggesting that we are at a point in the white-collar business world that is most comparable to when computers came to the office. So there may be some of you out here in the audience who can remember back to how that was. And as I'm told, it wasn't like one day everybody showed up and got comfortable using the computer. That's something that is happening over time. But recognizing that everybody who's coming up, the younger cohort, they are going to be expecting that this is part of the technology tool set that we will use. And so embracing that in ways and engaging with them to help get everybody there that much faster is going to benefit your organization. It's my position. Just as a experiment, I fed in some of the project I've been working on is called Leapfrog. And I have I think if you hover on that, you can play, there's an audio clip. But before you go, it looks like it's playing, but I don't hear it.
Eruptions left and right. It's like trying to conduct an orchestra in the middle of an earthquake.
Okay, that's a pretty intense image, but you're right. So what's a supply chain expert to do? It's like they need a crystal ball these days.
Well, we might not have crystal balls, but
yeah,
How about an AI assistant instead?
Ooh, now that's intriguing. Is that where Leapfrog comes in?
It is. Leapfrog's this new tool from Optilogic. It's designed to, well, it basically helps make designing and managing your supply chain way faster.
Okay, but AI in supply chain, that sounds kind of intimidating.
I get it. A lot of people hear AI and think robots taking over. But Leapfrog's different.
Different how?
It's built specifically for supply chain work. It uses something called an LLM, a large language model.
An LLM, so like a super powered AI brain.
Kind of. Imagine feeding a computer program every supply chain textbook and research paper ever written. That's essentially what an LLM is, except, digital.
So it's got all that knowledge, but how does that actually help someone who's actually doing supply chain work day to day?
That's where Optilogic's expertise comes in. They trained Leapfrog on their own database called Anura.
Anura, like the frog.
Yep, and this database is packed with real-world supply chain models and years of Optilogic's own experience.
Okay, so it's not just book smarts, it's got like street smarts too. Supply chain street smarts.
Exactly. And here's the best part. You don't need to be a coding expert to use it. You literally talk to it in plain English.
No way.
All right, so that was the output of this, one of the features of Notebook LM, and they have come out with a new version since I haven't played with it in the past couple weeks. But this was, I think I had 6 or 7 source documents, presentation, a few PDFs, and some of our test data, internal test data about the types of use cases that you could use this Leapfrog tool with. And that's what Notebook LM spit out as a 7-minute, 2-person podcast made by AI, making with the objective of communicating all of that information that's baked into those documents to an accessible format for people who maybe aren't going to take the time to read through all that or wouldn't be able to digest it fully. Just one example, new ways of interpreting information, organizing, curating, and kind of getting to understanding. All right, I think we just have one more, so if we can head back to the pond and check out Geigo Lives. Geigo, garbage in, garbage out. We all know that one. Do you know where it comes from? I didn't either, but I should have known. It's not that guy, but I liked his quote. This is actually the original source, according to my internet research. 1957, the Army. I feel like they're always the best at the acronyms. FUBAR, that's a good one. But I do think it's worth reiterating the point that Charles Babbage made there back in the 1860s, I think it was, about, if the quality of the information is being fed into a learning model is going to directly impact the quality that you're getting out. In a very similar way, I would argue, to whenever you've used that garbage in, garbage out phrase previously, it still applies in this Gen AI world, even perhaps more so. So having an understanding of what is going into the model that you are using, how is it being trained, is a really important thing to know. And just some more recent research here that also leverages this commonly known phrase, learnings from machine learning papers on adjusting. Basically, they inserted some incorrect data into the training set, or they introduced intentional bias to the training set, and somewhat not surprisingly, but good to be reminded that what the performance of that LLM was influenced by the quality of that data that was being fed in. So keep that in mind as you're using these tools. The better handle you can have on how it was being trained, what went into it, the more confidence you're going to be able to have in using whatever's coming out. All right, if you can take me to the 404, and then I'll just proceed from there. Shout out to Brandon and back for navigating us through the pond. And I'll just give a quick plug. If you head to optilogic.com, or if you scan this QR code, you can learn more about Leapfrog, that natural language text to SQL LLM that we've fine-tuned at Optilogic on our, we have a team of going on 100 people now. We're growing, exciting times. But our core competency is supply chain and supply chain design. And so we have baked in our knowledge of supply chains and the types of models that our customers and our services consultants are using to this LLM, so that now we have a tool that allows any user, in fact, you yourself can go and sign up for a free account and play around with Leapfrog. It's in public beta right now, and converse with it in natural language. You can use English, Spanish, whatever languages you want. You can converse with your data and your models in a way. It speaks back in SQL and allows you to then, if you like what it's saying, you can take that and do things with it to either visualize your data, make updates to it, build models, do lots of things. And we're just getting started. That's one of the most exciting things to me about this space is, learning models in general. They can keep getting better and better if you're feeding them good quality food. Okay, for my wrap up, just wanted to say sometimes change in perspective is helpful. We had this beautiful design working with an artist because we had this vision for creating a mural at our office. And then when we went to have the painter come out, the muralist, they were like, oh, you're going to have the frog underneath the ladder. And so we just rotate 180 degrees. Sometimes a little perspective change can be helpful. So hopefully I brought one or two new perspectives to you today. Thanks for the opportunity.